Will Joe Burrow take a team-friendly deal in Cincinnati? Who's the next quarterback set to sign a huge extension that only Tony Wiggins can relate to bank account-wise? Plus, our reactions to the 2023 NFL schedule.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, everyone, and welcome in to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. He is Rapien and Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, and shout out to all the everydayers. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcasts. And Tony, let's dive right on in, because Joe Burrow talked for the first time this offseason on Tuesday afternoon and said a lot of interesting things about his contract, admitted that he was involved in contract negotiations with the Bengals, admitted that he knows what he wants and what he's looking for, that he doesn't have to consult, say, a Josh Allen or any of these other quarterbacks that have gotten paid in recent years, and at least left the door open to take a team-friendly deal or maybe a hometown discount, as they say. And we haven't really seen that in this new era of quarterback markets, at least since Patrick Mahomes, and it was a 10-year, $400+ million contract. He was getting paid regardless. Mm-hmm. Do you think Joe Burrow could be the first one that takes a team-friendly deal in hopes of keeping top guys around and in town in Cincinnati?
He'd be the third one behind Mahomes, who you just mentioned, and Tom Brady, who did it forever, right? Mm-hmm. So I tell you who doesn't want him to do that: Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. They don't want him taking those deals. They absolutely don't want him taking those team-friendly deals because they're going to be expected. It's a copycat league. They're going to be expected to do the exact same thing. And I'm pretty sure with the way things went for Lamar Jackson that you would never see that happen with Herbert, Lawrence, and Joe Burrow. It's just, the team would never let that happen. One, you don't have the aspect of them being a quote unquote running quarterback and all of this stuff. So even though they all can, they can't get on that bicycle when they need to. The bottom line is they check all the boxes in terms of how a quarterback is supposed to be played according to people. And it just won't happen. But I wonder what would have happened if someone had done this prior to Lamar getting this deal and what Lamar's stance or way of doing business would have been. But good for him. They do have a lot to do coming down the pike with T. Higgins. And then, of course, at some point, Jamar Chase, even though he'll be on a fifth-year option. But, yeah, if you want to field a competitive team, you have to look at the big picture if you're these young and new age quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's unrealistic for me to expect any of these young guys to go the Mahomes route. And by the way, Mahomes did it for a few years. It sounds like he's going to get more money on his deal this offseason to help things and make his contract more comparable to these contracts that have just kind of blown it out of the water from an annual average salary basis. And so let's start there. I don't think Burrow's going to take and obviously I'm pretty close to it, a neighborhood discount or a discount, a hometown discount or whatever you want to call it.
You're talking about $250 million. Discount shouldn't even be in that.
But I don't think he takes $45 million per year, right? I just don't. I don't think you're going to see a quarterback go that route now. But in how he can help the team, and this is just for my stance, is sign a longer extension and allow them to structure it in a certain way where guaranteed money kicks in at certain times. That way, they can keep Jamar Chase and can keep T. Higgins. And not just those guys, because they can do that, but also field the rest of the team and the rest of the roster and field a competitive team. I agree with you. I think Tom Brady was one. Mahomes has clearly shown a willingness to help and restructure and do things like that. He's still taking a ton of money, right? Brady never made anything close to what Mahomes signed for. It's just a different era. I wonder if Burrow decides to be that guy and says, okay, this is the plan, and just kind of opens things up a bit to allow them to do that. We'll see. But as big of a joke nationally as the Bengals are, and I still think there are plenty that question them, the offensive line and, different things that they've done. They've showed Burrow each and every year that they're willing, since he's been in the league, they're willing to spend in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to spend on offensive linemen. They're willing to spend on defense. They're willing to go out and get the best player in the draft, even though their star quarterback is coming back from a knee issue. They went and took Jamar Chase, not Penei Sewell. Why? Because they knew, one, that Chase was the better prospect. Two, that Burrow loved Chase and wanted to play with Chase. So, yeah, I think they've shown him every step of the way that they're loyal to him. And so I wonder if he goes that route. It's still tough for me to envision, a $45 million average annual salary for a guy like Burrow, who should reset the market, who should get 55 plus million and be the next top paid quarterback in the NFL, assuming he signs next, which we'll talk about all these other guys in a second.
I'm telling you, if he does it, if he usually the next guy up is the next guy up, right? And at one point, Kirk Cousins was that guy. Well, no, let me rephrase that. At two different times, Kirk Cousins was that guy. And he reset the market, then he got his extension. And what you've seen is, all right, so whatever Jalen Hurts got, Lamar's going to get that and a little bit more. You know what I mean? So you've seen the next guy, and I think they all seem to have a responsibility to do that, not just because of it only. It's not just because it's their time. It's because it was somebody else's time before them that put them in a position to ask for and demand what they're going to get. And it's almost like you're loyal to the NFLPA, where when it's your time, man, you can't just get up to bat and then turn the water off for other people, because the reason you're in that position is because somebody did it for you. So this is all about the fraternity of it, if you will.
And so that happens in baseball.
That should.
These top outfielders will go to wherever. They'll play insert whatever team that you want to rip. Heck, I'll use the Reds as an example because they haven't been good in recent years. Hey, if the money's there, your tail is going to Cincinnati. I don't care if New York is 10 million under. You take the money. You go where the money is, right? And I think you're right. There is some pressure there, no doubt.
There is. Now, if he sets a precedent and he doesn't do that, it's going to be looked at and viewed by a lot of people as good for him because he wants to win. And he knows this makes it easier for him to win. But then, there's always those naysayers. And what the naysayers are going to say is, just because you save the money don't mean they're going to be using it correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They'll get that. What about this? What about all the teams that pay quarterbacks a bunch of money and then they can't field a good roster because they don't draft well?
Mm-hmm.
There'll be people that point at that and say, you saving up $7-8 million a year doesn't mean a hill of beans if they're taking the money. Like, for instance, house buying. You bought a house and I'm buying one. So the thing is if you don't spend it wisely and take care of it, then you're going to screw it up anyway. So that's the thing that the naysayers will say, don't give them no discount. Because by you not giving them a discount, it makes them actually sit down and really do their jobs even better when they know their pockets are tighter. They have to make better, more sound decisions. So the thing is there's going to be people on both sides of this thing that will cry, but the owners, the 31 other owners outside of Cincinnati, will smile and then try to use that to say, Joe's a good guy. This is how you do it if you want to win. And they'll use that in negotiations with everybody else.
Let's talk about that in negotiations with everybody else, and if it could affect it if they went that route. But who could be next in line to get paid? Obviously Burrow's on that list. We will do that coming up next right here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is the #1 protein bar on the planet. High protein, low sugar, low calories, and perfect for you, for me, for Tony Wiggins, for Joe Burrow, for any of these star quarterbacks that might get paid. They're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they're easier to get than ever because you can get them right now at Built.com. You can also get them at your local Walmart and Sam's Club stores. So you might as well check him out. I call him the number one protein bar on the planet for a reason, because you're not sacrificing taste for something that is healthy and that is going to fit your macros and is going to help you get in better shape. So make sure you check them out today at Walmart, Sam's Club, or build.com.
All right, running it down here on Locked On NFL on the Wednesday with James Rapien. I am Tony Wiggins. So we were talking about these said quarterbacks and Joe Burrow's potential contract and what he might do, and how we're looking through cryptically through trying to see through this little crack in the door whether or not he is going to take a little bit of a discount. We got to consider who these guys are, who's next in line. And I would think that Justin Herbert and then Mr. Tua down in Miami, if he can stay healthy, are going to be two. It really is going to be a case study on what people think about Tua, even if he's healthy this year. How will the concussions, even though if he doesn't get another one this year, people are going to still remember. How's that all affect his stuff? And then, of course, Trevor Lawrence will be coming after that.
Yeah. It's the Tua one's interesting. That one's tough. I think the one that would be wild. Could you imagine if Burrow did that? If he took a team-friendly structure, whatever the case is, and you're Justin Herbert, and you haven't accomplished as much, but people think you're better physically, but team-wise, you haven't had that success. How do you ask for more? I think that there's a real interesting dynamic there. And that's why if I'm Herbert and I hear these comments today on Tuesday, I would say, all right, let's get this done with Los Angeles now. Let me be the next guy that one-ups Jalen Hurts, because the Bengals, if you're Burrow and he wants market resetting money, guess what? The Bengals are going to give it to him. They've always done it. That's going to happen. And so if you're the Chargers, maybe you want to wait and see if he takes some interesting structure or goes a certain route where it helps your cause, so to speak, with Herbert. Because otherwise, if you're resetting the market, you're resetting the market. And it's not going to be much different. But you never know if there's that outlier.
So I'm sitting here trying to think, and I'm looking up, if you see me looking down, because I'm doing a little what they call T-Wig two-finger research. All right, so does it matter? Does it matter if the who's next up? Does it matter what order they go in when they were picked in the same draft? If they're picked in the same year, and a lot of these teams, a lot of these guys that we're looking at, they were picked in different years. So them being up to plate, like Lamar's kind of been up to plate for 2 years. You know what I'm saying? But them being up to bat to get the extension. What happens when you get guys that are all in like the same year? Tua, Herbert, and Burrow, they're all in the same season. Weren't they all drafted in the same season?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, so Burrow was 1, Tua was 5, Herbert was 6.
So what do? Do you go, does your value, because in the past it hasn't mattered how good the player is. I mentioned Kirk Cousins for a reason, right? So do you go order of importance based on your value, based on how good you are? Or if Burrow goes first, does that set the market for the other two guys, mainly, especially Herbert, because Tua is a little bit different? Does he now go in and say, well, I'm next? Or what if he waits another year, doesn't do the extension right away, plays into next season, and then decides to do it? If I'm Burrow, I wait. If I'm the Chargers, I do it before Burrow does it. I mean, if I'm Herbert, I wait. I would want to wait. But if I'm the Chargers, I would want to do it earlier. If I'm Herbert and Burrow gets his money this year, I'd probably play this year and hope to put up these gargantuan numbers and then come in and say, okay, he did his deal, and y'all might think he's better than me, but that was a year ago. We got inflation. We got more money coming into the salary cap. The TV deal is going to be coming in closer to my contract and his because I went second. So I find it very interesting. It's going to be a little bit of something that we need to keep our eye on. If he does what we suspect he might do and take that deal, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what those other guys do behind him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's It's the dilemma. It's the dilemma on both sides. And you're right, Tua is mighty, mighty interesting because if he goes out there and shows he's healthy and can finish the season and play at a high level, and he's got every weapon out there you could ask for.
Right.
So he's one of those guys where, people I think forget because of Herbert, because of Burrow or Burrow and Herbert. He was in that class too. And a lot of people really loved him. There's a reason the Dolphins took him 5th, even with the hip issue. There's a reason. And without that hip issue, he's probably the second quarterback or the second overall pick. He might have went ahead of Chase Young. Herbert, if he had played at a different school, might have went ahead of Chase Young. And it was just miscast, obviously, at Oregon. So that's a really good quarterback class. And then they set the tone for the next year with Trevor Lawrence. And that's the one that all of these guys, they're in the AFC. And the AFC is loaded at quarterbacks. And so how these contracts go, that could be the tiebreaker in the AFC because these rosters are really good. We talked about it a few weeks ago, just looking at the different quarterbacks. Could you imagine? I mean, the difference, $5-6 million could be the difference between Trevor Lawrence and him having that next guy that he needs, that role player that they need to get over the hump against a Miami or against the Chargers or against the Bengals in the postseason.
I think Trevor is going to be the one who, regardless of what happens with these guys, he's going to be the one that could, without hesitation, set the new mark because he's not in the class with those dudes. Jacksonville loves him to death. He really, really fits in with this community a lot. And then the other thing is Jacksonville has not had a franchise quarterback like this. With all due respect to Mark Brunell, they haven't had this. They waited forever to get it. I don't think they're going to hesitate one bit to go ahead and just say highest paid player in NFL history and stretch it out, do something like what Mahomes did, stretch it out. And would we think Trevor would take a Joe Burrow, a hometown discount? Maybe, because he's built like that. He's that type of guy. But we can always, the Jacksonville folks can always say, on paper it's less, but we don't pay state taxes. And you're in a division with the Texans and the Titans. So that's 2 more road games minimum that you're not paying state taxes on your money, because I don't think people realize where you play only affects your salary at home. It doesn't. When you go play New York or California, it's like you live there for that week, right? So it affects every single thing that happens with the franchise. But it's a very, very interesting question. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm biting this entire conversation, and I am doing my show locally based on the fact that James Rapien thinks that Joe Burrow might take a little bit of a discount, and would Trevor Lawrence follow suit? That's an excellent show. And I'm going to tell you right now here on Locked On NFL, I'm stealing.
He might. No, he might. He left the door open to it. I don't know what he wants, but he knows what he wants. He said that, and he said he's involved in negotiations. Why say that stuff if you're just going to ask for $500 million over 10 years or ask for $55 million per over the next 4 years and take a short-term deal where it's not as team friendly? Answer this for me on the other side.
Do you think it's a negotiation, or do you really think it's just them coming to an agreement on how they're going to structure it and what's best for everybody involved? Because when you're as good as him and you've done what he's done at this stage, you ain't gonna get no argument over money. Not with, even with Cincinnati and their reputation for not wanting to pay people or whatever. You ain't gonna get no argument over money with a guy like that. It's like he can almost write his check, but it's like, okay, now let's structure this. If you know what you want, we're gonna give it to you. I'm dead serious. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, maybe not Justin Herbert, but Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow walks in that door and says, "Hey, owner, this is what I want." You said, "Okay, you got it. But now let's structure it so it's team friendly so we can help you on the field."
Yeah, I'll answer that coming up next. Tony, I think it's an interesting question, and I think you're spot on. To me, the Bengals can't really negotiate money a ton, maybe a little bit, right? A little bit on where the guaranteed money is or certain things like that. But overall salary, tough for me to see them. Not that they won't mention it, but I agree with you. It's like going into to buy a Ferrari. Well, the price is the price.
Price is the
price.
price.
And maybe you can get a little better interest rate, or you can get a couple more months added onto that loan or something like that. And that's the part I think where if you're the Bengals, you try to negotiate. And if you're any team, is the years, how you structure it, you explain why it's better this way or that way. And so I think you described it in a way that makes sense, because just talking with people inside the Bengals front office, Duke Tobin talked at the combine. I know Zach Taylor's talked about it a little bit as well. They want a deal done. And on the other side, Joe Burrow wants a deal done. So now I think it's just about ironing out all the details, not necessarily negotiating, but ironing things out a bit and making sure that both sides leave the table happy, because Burrow's the franchise and vice versa. They've been loyal to Burrow and put him in position to win. And so I think that's where they're going to be.
Here's what you won't hear. Here's what you won't hear. Some things that you heard when Lamar was negotiating. They'd be better off just letting them go and build your team. I think Bucky Brooks, who I have a lot of respect for, said that, and I couldn't disagree with him so fast. I'm like, do you realize how hard it is to find a franchise quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lamar plays. They beat the Bengals last year. I'm sorry, Joe. And you know I'm telling you the truth, James. They probably win that game if Lamar Jackson plays. With the way the ebb and the flow, the way the game went, I just don't understand people. I understand building your roster, and I understand not having a Kirk Cousins who makes $40 million on your roster. I understand the Giants fans that might have thought Danny Dimes wasn't worth all that money, but what are you going to do, right? You know, you could easily be the Tennessee Titans and paying Ryan Tannehill all that money. He ain't worth it. Kirk Cousins all that money. He ain't worth it. You could be paying. Or how about this? Look at who wins Super Bowls over like the last, and look who hasn't won them. Maybe one of the most complete teams ever has been the San Francisco 49ers. And guess what? They keep coming up short. And why do you think they keep coming up short?
Yep.
They got everything you want. They got everything.
Yeah.
And they can't win it. They can't win it. And every time you turn around, somebody's hosting the Lombardi trophy. And they're a superstar quarterback. So until you can prove to me, I don't care if it's even the NBA, I'll tell you that. Until you can prove to me that you can win a championship without a guy that's a top 7 player, nobody's going to be wanting to be that team that doesn't have a top 7 player. Everybody used to think the San Antonio Spurs was all just because they were a great organization. Tim Duncan's one of the 7 best players in NBA history, according to everybody. So I think you need that dynamic player to get you over the top. And as long as that's the case, man, people are going to do whatever they can to value those guys. Even you got people out here thinking that you need to draft a quarterback, and every year draft a quarterback until you get it right, or that much. I don't buy that, but I still say there's nothing less question than the fact that if teams want to win a Super Bowl, they need a great quarterback. It is the longest lasting truth in sports, I think, is you need a great quarterback in order to win a Super Bowl.
It's the perfect makeup. It's a perfect makeup, because you might have a flaw. You might not have the best right tackle or left guard, or that defensive line might not get the heat on the opposing quarterback. If you have a great quarterback that can put up points, that can slide in the pocket, or can make throws under duress, or is just this freak athlete like Lamar, and can make plays, well, guess what?
Joe Gibbs fooled everybody. Joe Gibbs fooled everybody. He won with Joe Theismann, who was good but not great, Mark Rippon, and Doug Williams. So ever since then, people have been thinking like, okay, every now and then you get a Rich Gannon, you know what I'm saying? Or you get a Brad Johnson. But for the most part, if you want sustained effort and the sustainability to win in the NFL, you got to get that position right. And until you do, you ain't going to win it.
He's Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. This has been Locked On Quarterbacks.
For the second week in a row.
That's right. Hey, most important position in sports. This is Locked On NFL, though. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thank you so much for listening to Locked On NFL.